All right. You are sitting at a red light and the bass thumping from the car next to you. You can feel it. You don't even see the song title, but there is a reaction inside of you where you say, I know that tune. Or you're pushing your cart through the grocery store and you can hear the song coming over the speakers and you just start humming along. Or maybe you're singing. No shame in that as well. And you're really brought back to some previous memories of life. Or perhaps you are doing the doom scroll and, 2 seconds in, you're like, oh, I love that tune. And you stop immediately because of that tune, right? You stop and you listen and you are immediately transported back to a different memory, a different thought, a different place where that tune has some type of connection. And it could be good, it could be bad, or it could be just a moment in your time, a tiny second in your life. And that is what music does for us. That is what music does in our lives. Now, today, I am going to talk about a podcast basics, and it's music. And it's one of my favorite subjects, but there are different thoughts around the usage of music. And I'm going to explore a little bit of these with you today. So, my name is Kim Parkinson. You're listening to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. And the first thing that I want to tell you about music, other than the just reactions we get internally to that, is music really does create that instant connection with our our minds, our bodies, our soul, perhaps even. And that is going to signal something inside of our brains to connect that to something. So here's my thought process. I want to kind of explore it a little bit here because I have been teaching one thing, but I have thoughts about it on another thing. So, right now in our world, we are omitting intros, right? I do have like a little ad stack intro before a lot of my episodes, but inside of the way podcasts used to be, it used to start with a little bit of music and then there would be you introducing your podcast and then it would maybe fade out of a little music, your regular episode, maybe a snippet with an ad with music, and then the ending would also have music. Now, if you've been listening to my podcast on audio, you do know that I still have a little bit of music at the end. I actually have added in some pan flutes. I love it. I love that particular sound. And so that's why I chose that. It doesn't necessarily bring up any kind of reaction to me other than I love that sound. But I bet if you're thinking about it, and if you've been here a little while and you've been listening to my podcast, I bet you can already hear the ding, ding, ding noise. I bet you can. So just so you know, that is by design where I don't have an intro and I don't start it with the music. I did when I first started. I did. If you go back to some of my very first episodes, there is an intro there with music at the beginning. And then I quickly dropped it. And I dropped it for the same reason that all those people have doom scrolls and stuff like it's just you got to connect with the audience within a very short amount of time. And so, therefore, the thing that had to go was the music and the intro. And I have been teaching that to my clients now for probably 9, 10 months, honestly. And it seems to be working as far as people just want to get right to the meat of it. They don't want to have to listen to that. I actually remember when I owned a craft store earlier in my life, I remember there was a very well known artist, and it was a gentleman, and he had a YouTube channel. I'm sure he still does. And he would have these giant intros with this, like, obviously was fully produced and all that, with these like old fashioned, like countdown and everything. And I can remember back then, and this is probably, I'll say 2016. So at least a good 10 years ago, I can remember then thinking, that's too long. And I would fast forward through it because it was too long. And I really just wanted to get to the meat of what he had to say. Same thing goes now. And this is 10 years later, right? I'm thinking, if you've ever heard of Ranger Industries, their spokesperson at the time when I had my store was Tim Holtz. And it was his videos that started this whole thought process about those intros are really too long. And so I've always taught to really try to keep your intros short. And now I just drop them all together. But now on the flip side of that, here is my other piece of it. I also know as an avid singo goer. Now, if you don't know what singo is, it is song bingo. As an avid singo goer, as someone that really lives and embodies music, I mean, I am consistently listening to music. I love it. I fold laundry to it. I like clean the house on Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings to it. I am always listening to some kind of music. I probably know more lyrics from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s than I know other amazing knowledge. And yes, I can probably sing you Chantilly Lace if you wanted to. But what I'm saying is that when you omit that intro at the very beginning, you don't get those first few recognizable notes inside of that person's head, inside of your listener's head. And so those first few notes are being omitted because as a society, we want to just get right into the meat of everything. But as a internal feeling that us as a society has, we're also not quite remembering what it is when we do a musical type intro. So there are some pros and cons to this. And right now I'm on the side of omitting the intro. But again, I love music. I love all of that. And so I really feel like if you wanted to have an intro with words, as long as you keep it pretty short, and by pretty short, I'm saying maybe like 20 seconds, maybe. If you can keep it to that, then I think it could work. Now, let me also explain why this has all come up recently. I had a student of mine in my podcast growth accelerator come into office hours and say, I have somebody that says they don't like music at all in any of podcast episodes. And okay, I don't think that's norm as far as I guess it depends because there is definitely a couple of different pieces here. I'm going to kind of work through this myself. So I definitely think music has a place. Does it have a place in between segments? It used to. There used to be people that would, and maybe there still are podcasts out there where they would have a segment where they talk about, daily news or whatever. And then they'd have like a little music and then they'd talk about, like international news. I don't know, something local news. And it would be like just a little snippet of a song, like a little something. I'm sure you've all heard these on like TV shows and things like that too, where in between each segment they would do a different music. And really, inside of like, say, old game shows and stuff, when they were going to commercial break, if you remember those back in the day, they would sometimes fade out music. I can definitely remember watching some game shows and the host would say, "We'll be back in 2 and 2." And it would be just a little bit of music fading out and then the commercials would start. Again, it's that reaction, it's that remembrance of what it is that we're listening to. And that then would translate hopefully positively if anybody heard those notes anywhere else. And by hearing those notes, let me say this. Music, there's a lot of different music, there's a lot of different everything, but it does not mean that it's exclusive to that one song. Think about how many tunes may start similarly or have similar notes in them, different pieces. And so you hear that. You don't always necessarily know exactly the song, but your brain is picking up on it and saying, I've heard that. Where have I heard that? It starts the catalog. It starts that digital, internal catalog. Where have I heard that? Oh, I heard that on Kim's podcast. That's a remembrance. That is a internal visceral reaction from a listener saying, I know where I've heard that. And maybe that will then bring them to want to listen to another episode or go find that or say, I haven't heard that in a while. Let me go look or something. That's what we want. We want that connection. But if you are doing little snippets of music in between segments, and maybe you're looking at your numbers and you find that those numbers are kind of dropping off at the in between those segments, it could be one of two things. And this is with testing. This is like A/B testing here, right? So it could be that that particular segment is not interesting. So test that. Or it could be that they aren't interested in that music. Maybe, music is again very much so to the point where if you had something upbeat and exciting, and then you had like a goth type doldrummy music, like maybe like think like Jaws, that might not work. You want the music to coincide with the tone that you have for your episode. So, kind of going back to this week's previous solo episodes, speaking about smiling when you talk, it's again about your tone, it's about your cadence and all of that. And you got to remember that when you choose music. So perhaps that music isn't the right music for that. Now, that being said, music is a choice. Some podcasts have no music in it whatsoever. That's okay. Absolutely your choice. Also, keep in mind your listener's choice. Is that something that your listener is interested in? Are you talking specifically about something that would bring up a visceral reaction of music? Perhaps music is required inside of your podcast episode. But if it is something that maybe you're getting, I hate to say this, but maybe you're getting complaints about it, let's try removing it. Or if you are finding that you just really love it and you know what, people maybe aren't loving it, maybe you can shorten it. Maybe you can shorten it to really like even smaller bits than you already had. That's possible. You can play around with it. Again, it's what we're trying to create is that automatic switch in somebody's brain that says, I've heard that. Yes, I like that. And yes, I'm going to now click on their podcast to go listen because I remember that person now. Okay. Now that we've kind of gone over a little bit about the music and how that kind of works, where can you get music and what are the ramifications? What is this about music? So I will tell you my very favorite place to get music is actually audiojungle.net. I love it. Absolutely. It is has so many different varieties and it has licensing. So I always suggest that you make that purchase of the licensing. Now there's several different licenses, so you have to look at which one works for you. If you are broadcasting to, millions of people every year, then you're going to have to buy the higher end podcast license. But if you're not, then perhaps one of the lower ticket licenses will work. I know sometimes they start at like $5 and sometimes that's fine. And maybe it works for a year and you just buy another one after that. That's an option for you too. So let me see. I actually wrote down a couple of different ones here. I'm going to check my screen here. So Pixabay, our YouTube audio library has them. Apparently, something called Ben Sound. I don't know that one. So that one just popped up on my screen here. But I've heard of Epidemic Sound. I definitely had that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing one of two things. Using AI to create your music. Although, as of my recording date here, you now need to say inside of your podcast episode if you're using AI. So that is a EU regulation, and apparently they are fining people. So make sure that if you use AI to speak or have music written or whatnot, that you have denoted that in your show notes of some type or in your description somewhere. It does not qualify, that particular bit does not qualify if it is just a regeneration of a word that you said. And for instance, Descript will allow you to do that. And it also does not include, at this time, does not include any type of editing that's automated or anything like that, regenerated or fixed in AI. So definitely check those laws and see where that might apply to you. Okay. But one thing I do want to say about music, you cannot just use anybody's music. You should purchase a license if you can. Keep that license on your desktop, wherever it might be, for future use if need be. Unless you are using something like YouTube or, again, Pixabay. Sometimes Pixabay will tell you that you need to you utilize the little phrase that they say inside of your show notes that says where that music's come from. So be aware of that as well. YouTube might also require you to do that. Again, I purchase all of mine from audiojungle.net. So I have a license. I have a license to be able to publish that and get that out there. And that's what I usually recommend to my clients as well, because it just makes it safer for you and for your podcast. I have heard of people who have gotten some of the free music from different places, wherever that might be, and then years later, been told that they need to take those episodes down because it was now a copyright infringement, because now they had made that a paid option. So just be aware of that in the event that you do want to use some music. Now, never, ever, 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 ever use any kind of music that is already licensed to an artist. I don't care if Taylor Swift is your best friend, unless she has actually explicitly, signed off and said, you may use that and you have that license, you're going to get flagged. It's going to get flagged by, probably podcast hosting, probably YouTube. It's going to get flagged. And especially in YouTube, if you're at all close to being monetized and you do not have a license for the music that you have, and that they think that maybe you should have a license for that music, they will take it down and demonetize that particular episode. So you don't want that to happen. You could find yourself a local artist and have them create you something, pay them. They would give you then a license for that, and that would be exclusive to you. I think that's a fabulous idea. Couple of reasons, right? You could actually really be supporting somebody that might need that. You get exactly what you want, and nobody else is going to have that. But perhaps it still has those little bits in the tune that allow people to connect that from your podcast to whatever other songs are out there in the universe. So I think it could be a win-win on that. So if you have a local artist that you can connect with, give them the information of what you're looking for. Usually they can use some type of a editing type software and create you something. I know my husband has done this with his band, for instance, and he will actually create like just drum beats, and he'll strum his guitar in, and then he'll just put it all together for his music for his band. He's never done that for me specifically, but I've never asked either. So don't go after him. He's a good guy. All right. So where can you use your music in your podcast if you don't want to do the intro? I always suggest doing it in the outro, right? I think that that's a great place. Kind of gives that little fade out as you are ending your show. If you've ever listened, more often than not, I do the fade out, or I'm sorry, it's a fade from the end of the episode to my actual outro that I have put in there. And so it's just a fade and into that, and then it fades back out again. So fade in, me talking, and fade out. So I leave it there. If you have any ads, I always suggest doing that as well, breaking up that. So people, especially if you do your own ads, if you speak your own ads, so you have a book to sell or program to sell or whatever it might be. And if you have an ad, I always suggest that you have just a little bit of a snippet of music before that, and then go into the ad and then go ahead and have a little snippet of music before you go back into your episode. That is actually more of a courtesy piece in my mind, because I feel like that is when you're basically stopping the conversation that you're talking about in that episode. You're giving them that ad so that they're not like, what is she talking about now? What's going on? I don't have any idea. So they have a total idea of like, this is something different. This is not the actual episode. This is an ad. And so in those particular cases, you can do those as baked in ads, or you can do those as a dynamic ad. So you could do that. So you could, again, make an intro. I always recommend for anybody that has a something that they need a disclaimer. For instance, a therapist or a doctor or any financial advisor, even if you have any of those and you need to have a disclaimer that, your talk today is not, you need to see your own professional or whatnot, something along those lines. A music behind that is perfectly acceptable as well. I feel like that's a good place for an intro. That's actually what I always recommend is if you are one of those types of podcasters, that you have that intro, and then we kind of move into the episode from there. So any kind of transitions, if you really are thinking that maybe you had a very short interview and then you went into something about that interview right after, and it was like a little transition, a little music there would work. Or if you had, for instance, maybe you had a couple of different questions, right? You had a couple of clients and they had different questions and they were totally different and maybe didn't flow into the next one. And you wanted to make sure that each one had their own like chapter marker, for instance. You could do a little music transition between each one of those. So something like that. Make sure that when you are adding that music in, you add it in and then run that through Audacity so that you make sure that the volume stays the same. The last thing that you want is for the music to be so loud and then you so soft and then that's very jarring for people. So make sure that you have that music normalized as well. So, all right. So as a wrap up here, I think my thought process is I love music. It is one of my most favorite things in this world. I think music is a big part of just a internal compass of memories of like that just database that we have. We have we all have some kind of music that is attached to a memory, I think. So I feel like even getting those couple of little beats in there would then allow people to remember maybe who you are if they hear those beats out of context, out of the podcast. Maybe it's just a beat in a different music, or maybe they're on an elevator and they've got elevator music and that just happened to have a few beats of what you've got. Or maybe, for mine, because I've got the pan flutes, maybe you're at a Reiki class, or maybe you're sitting there at the wellness spa and they start playing the pan flutes and you're thinking, Kim's podcast, I've heard it. So I'm all for music, but again, you have to have the right type of music. Follow along with your flow of your podcast, making sure it's the correct music. Use little bits is fine. Or if you've gotten a lot of unhappy listeners or people reaching out to you saying, I don't like it, then make that choice, make that decision. Do you want to keep it or do you want to reduce it? Maybe you don't let it go altogether. So that's something to think about. All right. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of information about music inside of your podcast and kind of covers a little bit of like those basics that you need to know. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Podcast Basics Summer Series. My name's Kim Parkinson. You've been listening to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. And remember, where your voice flows, your business grows. Until next week, see you soon. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me today. If you're ready to deepen your visibility and grow your podcast in a way that feels aligned, come join my email list at kpcreativemedia.com/newsletter, where I share exclusive guidance, support, and next steps. And if this episode resonated, I'd be so honored if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the most powerful ways to support the show and help other spiritual women discover it. Until next time, keep showing up and sharing your voice.